This is the Parenting in Perspective podcast, a Happy Families podcast. My name's Dr Justin Coulson, and you probably noticed this is a slightly different intro to what we normally do on the podcast. Well, we're doing things a little differently for the next couple of months. I'm going to be conducting a whole range of interviews, and we'll have an interview series that we're calling Parenting in Perspective. And the reason I'm doing this is, well, number one, to mix it up, but number two, I think that there's so many important voices, so many powerful ideas that I want to share with you to make your family happier. And I can't think of a better way to do that than in-depth conversations in podcast form that you can listen to at your convenience and really, well, number one, be entertained, but number two, grow and learn from the conversations that I'm having. So for the next couple of months, I haven't decided how long this season will be, but I'm guessing it's going to be about a dozen interviews. Going to be speaking to a guest, and I've got some amazing guests lined up. I just can't wait for you to hear some of the people that I'm going to be discussing big things in parenting with. You'll have the opportunity to learn, have a lot of fun, and get into the detail of these people's lives, or in the case of researchers, what they've been studying and how we can implement that in our lives and in our families to make family life better and to grow better, stronger, more resilient children.
Freediving did teach me something quite early on, which was to let go of that need to feel like I should be in full control the whole time. But an early mistake was diving with lots of fear, feeling that as long as I puffed up my chest and asserted my control and dominance in each dive, that I would get deeper than any other athlete. And I think that there's some interesting analogies here when I think of my own experience in parenting as well, of trying to exert control or convince my kids that they should do it my way. I need to find that actually, if I took a step backwards and looked at it more holistically and turned the volume down on my ego, that I actually might find a far more effective way of getting the outcomes with my kids that I truly need.
Ant Williams started his career as a sports psychologist, working with elite athletes involved in dangerous sports. Challenging himself to take up an extreme sport like those he was counselling, he discovered the sport of free diving. Since that discovery, he worked his way into the world top 10 rankings of the sport. He set a personal best, diving to a depth of 100 meters, and set a world record for the deepest dive under ice. In the open ocean, Ant can hold his breath for a staggering 8 minutes. Ant is the founder of Modus Leadership Developments, an organisation that specialises in corporate development around sales effectiveness. He lives with his family on the Victorian surf coast. So Ant, tell me more about your work and your family. Who is Ant Williams?
So Ant Williams is the dad, and I have two beautiful young kids. So I have Luke, who is 14 years old, loves his gaming, loves his animals, and loves his jiu-jitsu. And I also have Chloe. Chloe is 11 years old, and she's more into arts, crafts. She loves dance and hip hop, and yeah, she's a little firecracker. And so we've got, the two kids, my wife, Marin, and we've got one little dog, Cookie, and we hang out down here on the surf coast.
Yeah, sounds beautiful. Now, your story fascinated me, Ant, from the very first moment that I heard it. You and I were speaking at a major conference for the Commonwealth Bank. I think it was maybe back in about 2017, 2016, somewhere around there. And you told a story about the part-time adventuring that you do as a free diver. I was inspired by the idea of free diving. When I was a teenager, I saw a movie called The Big Blue. And then when I met you, it brought all of that back to me. And I actually started to do some free diving for a little while. But what exactly is free diving? Now, this is going to relate to parenting soon for people who are thinking, why is he talking about this? It will. But can you just tell us what free diving is and how you actually got into it?
Yeah, sure. So freediving is a sport where you take a boat out into very deep water. You run ropes down off the side of that boat. And then everyone who's competing has to nominate a depth that they can believe that they can swim down to retrieve a tag on one single breath of air. And then they must make it all the way back to the surface without blacking out.
It sounds like so much fun, Anne, and let's just dive down deep and try not to pass out underwater. That makes perfect sense.
Oh, look, it is a scary sport. I think it's a sport that really combines a couple of very primal fears. You've got this fear of suffocation, And you've also got this other fear of, I think all of us have it. You're born with this fear of being out in very deep water, where if you start sinking in that water, it might start off beautiful open blue and turquoise, but then quite quickly it gets a dark blue, and then you can be in pitch black darkness and know that you still have another minute of free fall sinking all alone in the open ocean in pitch black darkness. So yeah, it's quite an intimidating sport.
How did you get into it?
Okay, well, because everyone asks me, why did you get into it? But yes, how did I get into it? Well, I studied to become a psychologist when I was at university. And in particular, what I was most fascinated by were athletes and how athletes could achieve a state of peak performance and perform consistently at the highest of their ability. Because I'd never been an athlete. I'd always thought of myself as somewhat athletic, but I'd never succeeded in sport. So I'm studying athletes, and I get introduced to this idea that you can help athletes perform better simply by helping them with their mindset and helping them become more mentally tough. And so I'm fascinated by this. I'm at university thinking, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And firstly, I wanted to see if it works, and did all this research that I looked into, and as part of the studies, I quickly realized that, boy, there's a lot in this. So I thought, great, this is it. After all these years, I finally figured out what I want to do with my life as my career. And so I went at boots and became a sports psychologist. So that meant 6 years at university. And, came out, did casework. A couple of years later, I'm a registered psych. It took me 8 years. And then after just a couple of years of consulting out to athletes, I just realized that I was a total fraud. I was a fraud because the athletes that I was working with were looking to me for real, genuine, insightful guidance on how to perform at their absolute best. Yet everything I was teaching them had come out of a textbook. I'd never succeeded at sport. And most of my athletes were doing dangerous sports like MotoGP, racing motorbikes, or rally, or base jumping, or big wave toe and surfing, or, Muay Thai fighting. I'd never done these things. I'd never succeeded in competition. And so I just, I really sat myself down one day and went, mate, if you're going to have any ounce of credibility as a sports psychologist, then go and try something. And because your athletes are doing dangerous stuff, maybe go and learn a dangerous sport and apply what I'm teaching others, and to see if I can actually have some degree of success in a sport. And that was it.
Certainly, I want to get onto the parenting in just a minute. But one of the things that actually seems to apply there immediately is you said that you were sitting in front of these people and feeling like you had no credibility. And I think that this may have some kind of a reverse parallel to parenting, because the people that you were sitting in front of, they had achieved all of this success. They were doing things that humans typically don't do. So they were extraordinary people. They were incredible athletes, and you felt like you didn't have any credibility. But I wonder sometimes if parents feel the same way. We're sitting in front of our children. It's been so long since we were a child. It's always challenging as a parent. Do you think that there's any parallels there, that sense of, I haven't got this at all? And what would you suggest to parents when they're feeling like they're, if I can use a metaphor, out of their depth?
Yeah. So like I was quite fascinated by this, around why it was such a deal for me. And because I think it's this type of imposter syndrome where you feel that you're in a position of authority or responsibility, helping support others. In my case, in athletes in my sport, yet I felt like a true imposter. I think that when you first have a child, then there's this belief that you'll automatically be a great parent because you're a wonderful person, and you buy into this, right? And then you realize that it's actually really hard and that you're ill-equipped. And then you sort of, I don't know, I think you do one of two things. There are those amongst us who seem to adapt very quickly and try to figure it out and invest a lot of energy. And then there are those of us who are more stubborn and just go, this is just who I am. It's me being more authentic to myself. And, you're just going to get what you receive from me. And I'm sure if it's anything like what I received, then you'll be fine. And we don't adapt. We just kind of pursue and push forward.
Let's reverse back to your freediving for a moment, because you've been very modest and humble about what you've actually accomplished in freediving. What I'd love for you to do is maybe outline Well, no, I'll say it because I know you, and I know that you don't want to give yourself a big head and all that kind of thing. But at one point, you were one of the deepest. You held a record, or had done one of the deepest free dives in the world in regular water. You went down to 100 meters.
Yeah, the deepest I've ever dived under the water in the ocean is 100 meters. At the time, that put me in world number 8. The highest I've ever ranked is world number 5 for deep diving.
So 8th in the world or 5th in the world, diving down to 100 meters. What does that do to your body when you dive into those depths? Could you describe maybe in a couple of minutes what doing that actual dive was about? You know, you're laying on top of the water, you take a breath, and then what happens? And what's going on inside your head and inside your lungs and your brain and your body as this is all happening?
Well, most of these events take place in pretty exotic locations. Where I did the 100 meters was at a competition called Vertical Blue in the Bahamas at a very remote island called Long Island. And you literally go down onto the sand on this very remote beach and start swimming out into the water. And within just a few strokes of your arms, the water underneath you is over 200 meters deep. And so when I swam out to this platform for the competition, there would have been 30 people huddled around the platform where that you have to dive in. And essentially you go out, you do a couple of warm-up dives, and then the officials will call you over to where they have a rope set up with the depth that you've nominated the day before. You go into that area, you clip into you have like a safety lanyard that you clip onto that main line that runs freely. And then you just lie there on your back, surrounded by all these people and officials and someone yelling out the time, which is a countdown timer. They start at 2 minutes and they count you down to 0. On 0, you have to take your final breath, roll over, and then start diving down to your nominated depth. So on 0, you pack in a huge amount of air, like you overinflate your lungs. There's techniques we learn to do that. And then when you roll over and you begin swimming, and you got to swim really hard to overcome all the buoyancy of all this air that you've got in your lungs. But it's lovely, it's kind of the fun part of the dive because it's beautiful, warm water, and you can see, 40 or 50 meters in the visibility. But then as you go down and you get to about 20 meters, it's starting to get pretty dark. In fact, when I did the 100-meter dive, by the time I got to 20 meters, it was pitch black. So then you start to feel a little bit more alone. And at 20 meters, you can stop kicking because the weight of the water above you is now so heavy that it actually just pushes you down. So you stop kicking, you bring your arms down by your sides, and you just kind of just really start to relax and just conserve your energy and go for the ride.
Can I just pause you there for a sec? You say you close your eyes and relax and go for the ride. But what you're actually saying is you're about to sink like a stone from 20 meters to 100 meters, and you're not going to fight it. You're not going to kick. You're just going to let the pressure of the water push you 100 meters down into the ocean.
Yeah, effectively, that's exactly right. So from 20 meters, you know that you've got about...
and you're going to relax while it happens.
Well, that's the hardest thing about the sport. So you've now got a minute and a half of free fall where it's in pitch black darkness. You're all alone, and the pressure as you go down, every 10 meters, the pressure gets so significantly greater on your body that weird stuff happens and you start to feel different sensations, but most of them are just degrees of discomfort that you go through.
Can you describe physiologically what's happening? So like what's happened to your lungs and to your blood vessels when you're at 50 meters or 80 meters or something like that?
Yeah, sure. 50 meters is quite a significant depth because once you're at 50 meters, you're not breathing any compressed air, which means that all you've got is the air that's in your lungs, and that's usually so compressed by 50 meters that your lungs are literally about the size of a grapefruit. So you're at what's called residual volume, which means that your lungs can't collapse any further. So physiologically, what happens is you get a shift of blood and plasma around your lungs that protect your chest cavity, we call it a mammalian dive reflex, so that you can carry on going deeper without any damage to your chest. But it's very uncomfortable, very unpleasant to go through, and you know that you're only halfway, and you still got a lot of sinking to do and a lot more discomfort to come.
When you say it's very uncomfortable, I'm imagining my lungs being compressed to the size of a grapefruit. And I can't help but think that I would expel air because of the pain. I mean, is it actual pain or is it just pressure and you just keep sinking?
Yeah, it's not painful, but it is very uncomfortable. It's like if you were holding your breath sitting on the couch and you got to 30 seconds and you're like, oh, this is kind of okay. And then you got to a minute and then it doesn't get painful, but it gets really uncomfortable. And if you decide to just sit in that discomfort for another 30 seconds, you'd be like, all bent out of shape, wanting to take a breath. And that's what freediving's like. But the sensation of pressure is one of discomfort. But it's like someone's giving you a giant bear hug from behind and you've got to tuck in your chin because someone's squeezing your throat and your stomach is being drawn up inside your chest cavity. So you've got all these things going on, plus this hard to escape fact that the longer you allow this to happen, the worse it's going to get and the further away from help you're becoming.
It sounds like such a tremendous sport when you describe it like that. So let's go back to your dive. So you're at 50 meters. You're obviously doing something about the pressure in your ears. That's called equalizing. So you're doing this kind of equalizing thing to keep your ears and eyes and head working, but everything inside you is squeezing and the pressure's getting greater and you're at 50 meters. You know you've got to go to 100. What happens in that last 50 meters and how long did it actually take from the moment you drew breath and dived under the water until you got to the bottom?
A minute and a half.
So it's a 90-second free dive down.
Yeah.
Okay. And what happens in the last
another
50
90
minutes?
seconds to get back up. So it was a bit longer. I think it was 3.5 minutes there and back. So yeah, a little over a minute and a half down and back each way. And yes, past 50 meters, it's very difficult once you're at residual volume because equalizing is so difficult when you've got no air left in your chest or anywhere in your body. So essentially there's this weird technique that we bring all our air out of our lungs and we store it in our cheeks and we use our tongue like a piston to circulate air around our head and into our eustachian tubes in order to equalize, which allows us to go much deeper. So why technically you can dive deeper using these techniques, it does get more and more uncomfortable. In fact, I remember as I passed through 90 meters thinking, oh my word, it's like someone's got a petanque ball and they're ramming it through my chest and trying to pull it out through my back. It just felt like that. It was incredible, the amount of discomfort. I kind of was glad that I had the peace of mind to just acknowledge it without being terrified about it. I just kind of acknowledged it and went, wow, this is crazy. I'll be glad when this is over.
Right. And so then you do the last 10 meters, you touch the plate, grab the tag, and fortunately you're attached to the rope by that lanyard. And so then you just turn around and you kick as hard as you can and swim back to the surface.
Yeah, well, you've got to really have your senses about you. So at the bottom, you can't muck around down there, but you don't want to have gone all that way to not retrieve a tag. Otherwise, you don't get it as an official dive. So look around at the bottom, get your tag, and then begin your ascent. And you want to do that quite quickly. For me, this is the hardest part of the dive, is when you're at the bottom and you're just starting to ascend, because you start to sort of do all these self-checks and balances. How am I? How do my legs feel? And when you go that deep, the pressure on you is so crazy, and you've got so much lactic acid buildup that when you go to kick, often your legs don't want to work. And that's not a good thing when you're that deep. Your legs don't want to work, and you're just willing them on. And it's very hard to keep away that voice inside your head that says, oh, this is not good at all. You're super deep and your legs aren't going. So you've got to, that's where mental toughness really does kick in. You've actually got to just acknowledge that's happening and really just will your body through it in order to get back to the surface.
And of course you made it. You got to the top and you were still, you were able to take a breath and you give everyone a thumbs up and everyone knew you were safe and you did this 100-meter dive. Now, since then, you've gone and set a new world record. You're the person who has dived deeper under ice than anybody else in the history of mankind.
Yeah, that's right. After many years, 17 years, in fact, of doing freediving and competitive events all around the world, I decided to do something that just kind of motivated me more and would give me my own sort of journey of self-discovery in the sport. So I decided to take an attempt at the world record to become the deepest man under ice. And I assembled a small crew. We went up high into the Arctic Circle in March of last year, cut a hole in and ice that was nearly 1.5 meters thick up on a frozen lake.
So just with chainsaws, you pull a chainsaw out and you drill it, you saw the ice and go 1.5 meters through the ice to get to the water below it.
Almost. So when you use the largest saw blade on the largest chainsaw you can get, it still does not reach the water on the first couple of hours of cutting. So once you remove that layer, then yes, the second layer down, you can actually get the blade to touch the water. It's cold and it's dark from 1 foot under the surface. It's you don't have to wait till you get to the bottom. It's just a whole nother level of ridiculous when you get down to the bottom. And because of that cover of ice and snow, no light permeates through that, which means that, from the second that you put your head under, it is 0 degree water and you're going to be diving down the entire time in pitch black darkness. Even when you put high power torches on, they just shine out into pitch black darkness, so nothing refracts back to you. Ergo, you have just no experience of comfort from any sort of light.
Do you ever get scared about what might be down there?
No, I don't really.
I guess there's other things on your mind, like holding onto your oxygen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So as I listen to these stories and think about what you're going through, I can't help but think that there are some pretty amazing metaphors for raising children. The first is, you mentioned being at 90 meters and feeling like somebody was literally trying to push a ball through your torso, and retrieve it from your back, actually push it through your body, the pressure. And while I'm not going to suggest that parenting gives us the same experience exactly, there are times where as parents, we feel tremendous pressure. We feel like the circumstances are high stakes. They just won't get off their screen. They just won't go to bed. They won't eat their dinner. That feels like high stakes in the moment when you're a parent, even if it's not life and death like your circumstances. And therefore it requires on the part of parents some pretty incredible self-control. And as a parent, there are times where we feel under enormous pressure. Maybe it's a child having a tantrum in public, or a teen is breaking our rules or swearing at us in the living room in front of the younger siblings and showing disrespect and all that kind of thing. There would be countless times where that high stakes pressure on a parent demands the kind of self-control that you need to have mentally when you're 90 or 100 or 70 meters below the surface. So obviously, you haven't actually indicated that you have had those times under the water. There is pressure, but have you had those fears and those worries, and have you felt that pressure? And if so, how do you control that? And what does that teach us about dealing with the pressure that our children sometimes enable us to feel?
Well, I think freediving does elicit a lot of fear and anxiety. I've been freediving for 18 years, and I still would find that on probably 30 or 40% of my dives, especially the deeper ones, I would experience fear or a sense that I need to be able to control everything, but I can't. Freediving did teach me something quite early on, which was actually to let go of that need to feel like I should be in full control the whole time, but to more follow a set of principles and guidelines that I knew would keep me safe through each dive. And it took me a long time to evolve those, but an early mistake that I think I kept doing for, I reckon, about a decade was diving with lots of fear, feeling that as long as I puffed up my chest and asserted my control and dominance in each dive, that I would get deeper than any other athlete. And then I found that most other athletes started to go past me in terms of how deep they were going, and I got stuck at a particular depth because that approach was no longer serving me well. And I think that there's some interesting analogies here when I think of my own experience in parenting as well, of trying to exert control or convince my kids that they should do it my way. I need to find that actually, if I took a step backwards and looked at it more holistically and turned the volume down on my ego, that I actually might find a far more effective way of getting the outcomes with my kids that I truly need. It's
really interesting though as well, the way you say that, Ant, because I'm thinking, those strategies that served you well until you got to that particular depth, let's say, for example, 40 meters, those strategies worked until that point. And I think as parents, we kind of get into patterns and we implement strategies at a certain level. But once our children get to a particular depth, that is, once they get to 3 or 4 or 7, we need to do something different because they've changed and we can't stay in that same pattern. But what about the pressure You described the extraordinary pressure, lungs the size of a grapefruit, feeling like you're being impaled and a ball is being pulled through your body and out the other side. As parents, we feel tremendous pressure. We feel in some ways that our children are doing some high pressure things to us. How do you deal with that pressure when you're under the water, and what does that teach us about parenting?
Yeah. So this is, I think, possibly the greatest thing that freediving has taught me, in fact, and it was a hard lesson to learn. It genuinely was that if I wanted to get deeper than 50 meters, then I had to change something fundamentally, not in my physicality or my technique or my equipment, but in my mindset. And I think for me, it's the same for parenting. Just like you said, you just need a different game plan in order to deal with new challenges. And for 10 years, was it 10 years? No, it's probably about 5 years I was stuck at 50 meters. And then 10 years I was stuck at another block, which was 80 meters. And for the 50 meter one, it was actually coincidental. It was someone else who gave me the guidance by saying something very extraordinary to me. I was at a master freediving camp over in Turkey. And I remember it was the final day of coaching and training after 2 weeks in Turkey in a plot called Cash. We were out on a boat. It was awful conditions with white caps and, waves. And there was only sort of 6 of us, and some of the top freedivers in the world and the best freediving coach in the world was there. And I was there suited up thinking, there's no way any of us are going to dive today. These conditions are atrocious. But I didn't say that because I didn't want to be seen as the sook in the group. And there was this one guy, his name was Topi Lutenhungas, who was a Finnish guy. And he was the world record holder in swimming down to extraordinary depths with no fins on whatsoever. And he hadn't really said a word to anyone for 2 weeks. He was like the most introverted guy I've ever met. Anyway, I was there freaking out. It was the last day and I hadn't got past my 50 bloody meters. And I went and sat down on the transom, so the back of the boat, just about to get in the water. And I sat next to Toppy. And he didn't say a word. I didn't say a word. And as I was putting on my mask, he turned around, he looked at me and he said, your problem? And I just looked at him and went, what? He goes, your problem is you don't know how to let go. You try to fight. And every time you try to fight, you get stuck. Your ears lock up, you tense up, and then you turn around and you have to come up because you can't bloody equalize, mate. And he goes, your problem is you don't know how to let go. He goes, as soon as you figure that out, you're going to go really deep. And then he just got in the water and the bugger swam off. I was like, hang on a second. What did you mean by that? And the weird thing is that then I swam out. When it was my turn, I went out to the rope. And the conditions were awful. Waves are breaking over my mouth as I was trying to breathe up. And all I could think of was this bugger had put this idea into my mind to let go. And the whole way down on my swim, I'm feeling all uncomfortable and bent out of shape. But over and over in my mind, it's saying, let go. And then as I sail past 40 meters again, in my mind, it's just saying, let go. And then I sail past 50 meters. And I sail past 60 meters. And then I ended up turning at 68 meters. And swimming back up. And it was the weirdest thing ever. It felt like a beautiful dive. It actually did feel in control, even though I'd released my sense of control. And it was the biggest shift I've ever made in freediving. I'm annoyed that it took me 10 years or 5 years to make that shift. And that it took one very strange comment. And sometimes that's all it takes, is just some insight or inspiration from somewhere else to give you that breakthrough that you need.
Now, I'm not going to suggest that parents need to let go. But if letting go was a useful strategy, and frankly, I think that letting go of control is a very important parenting strategy, how would you advise somebody to let go? How does a parent make that switch where they still care about the outcome? I mean, clearly, as a free diver, you don't want to die. You want to get back to the surface. You very much care about the outcome. So how do you continue to guide your children, care about the outcome, and help them to move in an ideal direction while having that level of detachment, that ability to let go? How does a parent do that in real life, in a practical way?
Well, for me, it's about realizing that I'm part of the issue. And that's hard I think to accept on a number of occasions when we see our kids being unruly is you think, this is my kid being unruly and it's them. They've got to fix this and I'm going to tell them how to fix this and they should listen to me because I'm the adult and I know best. Whereas in fact, we still want the same outcome. We want to get our kids through something that's a significant challenge. The insight for me from the freediving has been, I still want the right outcome, which is to go deeper. I want to feel that experience of being successful with that, but I have to be more humble. I actually have to acknowledge that what I'm doing is not working in this situation, and I have to be open to different paths to change it up. And when I figured that out in freediving, it was monumental for me. I think it took me years before I then learned how to take that insight and apply it to how I was parenting. And I still don't get it right all the time. There's no way. But I catch myself more often now going, what outcome am I really after here? What's the best outcome for my son or my daughter? And what else can I try? If I put my ego to one side and explore different paths, and what does my child really need from me today or right in this moment? And I'm just trying to be open to explore different ways of being for my children.
So let's talk about this in a really concrete way. Let's say I've got a child and I don't feel like they're living up to their potential. And by the way, I've got a massive problem with that statement. I want my children to live up to their potential. What does that even mean? Like, who actually does live up to their potential? Anyway, I digress. But a lot of parents will say, I really want my children to live up to their potential, whether it's academically or whether it's in the sporting arena or whether it's musically or in their art and drama pursuits, whatever it might be. I want my child to live up to my potential. And so we've got this, let's say there's a whole lot of pressure around this because the child is not living up to their potential. They're not doing the stuff that they said that they would do. How do you let go of that based on, you've given some really nice ideas in an abstract kind of way, in that general sense of we need to let go. But when you're in the heat of the moment and you're thinking, I've spoken to this 8-year-old or this 18-year-old 15 times about this. We keep on having the same conversation and they're just not putting in the work. They're not going to soccer practice or they're not studying for their exams or they're not doing their music lessons properly so they're going to pass the music test. How do you let go? Should you let go? I think you and I both agree that the answer to that is probably yes. But if so, how do you let go in a way that actually works?
Yeah, look, and I'm going to be honest. I struggle as much with this as any parent. So, I guess all I can offer here is that I want them. I want to just be there to agitate what's happening with your internal dialogue. Now, I know that that's another concept, right? And I'll try to get more concrete for you because you've rightly asked me to be more concrete with this stuff. And so what I mean by that is I want to challenge them to play through the scenario, to just walk through. Okay, so you don't want to do your homework and you don't want to participate in Taekwondo anymore because you feel bored and you want to play with mates or build TikToks. And okay, cool. So where does this, what do you love the most about this? And where does this take you? And what things were you learning from Taekwondo that you kind of miss right now? And I literally just play it out in the conversation with them, just to kind of go, where does this lead us to? And sometimes they go, no, I'm really happy just being me, enjoying building my TikToks right now in the moment. And you got to suck it up, Dad. That's just how it's going to be. And I go, right, my child's not ready for this other conversation yet, but it doesn't mean that they won't be in a week's time. And so I'll try to have it again with them in a week's time. And you just got to stay really open, because if you go in and go, listen, I'm going to tell you what happens if you follow down this path for any longer, building your TikToks and not doing your homework, and
you're going to be a failure. Your life's over. We might as well just give up now.
You're not living up to your potential here.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the outcome you want. I'm going to give you one more concrete example really quickly. So I would love my kids, given that I've moved my family down the coast, I would love my kids to take up surfing. And what happens is you get them out surfing and, for the first couple of times, they really love it. And then the next time you try to take them out, they go, oh, no, I don't want to do it anymore. It's cold. It's wet. My wetsuit doesn't fit right. None of my mates are coming, and no, that's it. Don't want to do it anymore. Or even worse, then you force them to, and they go out and they have a wipeout. A big wave hits them and they go, I hate this sport. You make me do it and I never want to do it again. And then it's kind of, as a parent, you go, man, I've screwed it up royally here. They're never going to do this again. But then it's about going, how do I get them to have a wonderful, positive experience with this and get some success with it? And even if I have to kind of engineer that scenario. So I would wait for the sunniest day with the best conditions. I'll get their mates over, get all the boards ready, and just go, we're going to go really short, just for half an hour surf. And I'll push them onto waves and make sure they have their most fantastic time. And then all of a sudden, that's it, intervention over. They just want to go surfing all the time. It's not always as easy to do because surfing is a pretty fun sport, I think, compared to something like doing homework. But there's something in that around being better at problem solving as parents, not always coming at it from the same angle that frustrates our kids and puts up barriers between us and them.
Yeah, my experience is that force creates resistance. In fact, just as you were sharing that, I had an experience just over the weekend. My 6-year-old has been so resistant about riding a bicycle. I mean, I'm a cyclist. I don't want to get on a road bike and come and do 100 Ks with me, but I just want her to come on a bike ride and enjoy the opportunity to be together as a family on a ride. And I've been, Emily, come on, I want to teach you to ride a bike. I don't want to learn. Now, the last time I took her on the bike, we took the training wheels off because she can ride with training wheels, no problem. Took the training wheels off and she had a couple of little stacks and, grazed knee, hurt a hand, all that kind of thing. Really simple stuff. She wasn't hurt badly, but it was enough to make her a bit miserable. And I realized that I wasn't doing, you're familiar with my 3 E's, right? So I needed to explore, explain, and empower. So I sat down, I put my arm around her, I said, Emily, can you tell me why you don't want to ride a bike? And, like you said, you actually ask all those questions. Where is it going to lead? What happens if you can't ride a bike? And she said, I don't need to ride a bike. I don't care. I said, okay, I get it. I said, and then I decided to explain. I said, Emily, I kind of put a bit of emotional guilt in just gently, not too much, just a little bit. I said, Emily, it would make me so happy if I could teach you because I know that you're going to love it. And we can have family bike rides and it'll be so much fun. And then I said this, I said, I'm not going to force you to do this, but I'd be so happy if you could. And then I empowered her. Why don't you have a think about it and let's go down and we'll learn to ride the bike, but only for one go. We'll just have one go. We won't do long goes. We won't do 5 goes. We're just going to have one go. And once you've had one go, that's all we've got to do. And it only took her about 2 or 3 minutes. She came to me and she said, all right, I'll do it. She wouldn't put her shoes on. She wouldn't get changed out of a dress, but she was happy to come and do it for one go. And 15 minutes later, she was riding the bike. And now she can't wait to get on it again. Like she just loves it. But it seems like, for about 6 months, I've been trying to force it. Even though I'm the parenting expert who says not to do it, I've been trying to force it. And then the one day where I eased off and said, when you're ready, but here's why it's important, and I get what your issues are, and I reassured her I won't let you fall, all of a sudden we got a result. So the pressure was off and it worked. Okay, now we need to move this along because I know the time's getting away from us. So and a couple of other questions for you. One more metaphor that stood out to me was this the idea that you're sinking into the depths of a dark, cold ocean and you're going deeper and deeper. And it feels a little bit like sinking into the depths of stress and fear with our children. So I'm thinking, maybe you've got a child that's got a health issue or a label or a diagnosis, or they're getting poor academic outcomes, or they're being bullied. And all those things are pulling us down deeper and deeper and further from the surface and safety and solutions. So as a parent is feeling like they're sinking, they've passed 20 meters and now the weight of parenting is simply pulling them down to an early grave. What would you say that parents can do to kind of, get back up to the surface for air, to take that pressure off when they are surrounded with really painful, very real pressures?
I think the first thing is to try to give yourself the breathing space to take a step back and get perspective over things. And there's 2 ways that I personally try to do that, whether it's with my kids and how I'm parenting in a difficult situation, or it's with my sport, because it's actually the same principle. I need to step back and try to see it for what it really is. And the first way that I do that is I give myself a break and give myself a period of time where I stop beating myself up over it, about maybe a failure or a perceived block that's mine, and I own it. And I just kind of acknowledge it for what it is and explore the idea that maybe I just need to get some help with it. And then the second thing I do is actually find people that I really trust and believe in to kind of go, hey, have you had to deal with something similar to this? What do you do? And I try to use them as a sounding board. Sometimes they might suggest an answer that I don't like, and it's not about just kind of taking blindly their view on things, but it's actually using others around me and my network, my social circle, is to just use as a sounding board to try things out and get some other ideas going. Because I think the biggest risk that we run is not getting in other ideas, other insights at how to approach a problem differently. It's like, if I'm a hammer, then everything's a nail. And I try to treat it all the same way. I'm saying break out of that. But if you're in it, you can't break out of it. You've got to take a step back, get on the back of the boat with Toppy and get Toppy to give you some random crazy advice. And you kind of go, I'm going to reflect on that. And maybe there's something in it for me. And you'll be surprised where that inspiration can sometimes come from.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's great. In psychological terms, we call it psychological or self-distancing. And there's a whole range of techniques that are useful there, but such important things for us to do, especially when we're dealing with those blockages as parents. Now, last question about free diving, and then we'll wrap up with my 5 questions that everybody in this podcast is going to get to work through, and they're rapid fire questions. But first, one last big one. What's the most powerful thing that you've learned from free diving? Not necessarily to do with family or parenting, just about life that you would share. Like, how does that thing help you to be a better Ant Williams?
Humility. That's the number one thing I've learned. The only way for me to be successful in my sport is to hang up my ego, or at least dial it down a bit. This is quite ironic, even saying this out loud, because it's a competitive sport, but I have to put aside my desire to win. I have to put aside my desire to be the deepest. I have to put away my desire to compare myself against others. And I actually just have to be humble. And the weird thing is that when you just try to accept that you want to do it for the sake of doing it, for what it teaches you about yourself and having that experience and testing your own boundaries, then it's a magical experience. And freediving for the last decade has just all been about that for me. I don't really care if I beat you or not. I'd rather you beat me. And when we, celebrated your success, that would be as exciting for me as having my own success with the sport. And for me, it's the same. And actually, when I reflect on what I love the most about parenting, is actually it's helping me become a better version of myself for my kids. And if I'm truly being honest to this intent, to being humble, then I don't force my kids to be another version of me. I just want the best outcomes for them. And to do that, I have to stay flexible, keep exploring and finding new ways to help them through some of these challenges, even when those challenges really grate me and bug the hell out of me. And I never get it right every time. It's always about kind of acknowledging this stuff's hard, getting perspective and getting help when you can.
Yeah. And of course, surfing.
And surfing, yeah. Lots of time out to go surfing and diving.
Okay, well, and we're going to set this podcast up in such a way that every guest on the podcast answers a series of questions to wrap things up. You're the very first person to try it. You're my first guest. So The good news for you is there's no pressure, because no one's going to compare your answers to all of the great answers in that amazing other episode, because you're episode number 1. Here we go with question 1. If we asked your kids their favorite thing to do with you, what would they say?
Oh, hands down, they'd say to go skiing together, snow skiing. We've only ever done that together as a family once, but I reckon they'd say snow skiing. Probably closely followed by camping. We haven't done a lot of camping either, but I reckon those have been some of the coolest memories we've had as a family. And then more on a day-to-day basis, probably just time that we spend together as a whole family, including the little dog Cookie. So it'll be walks on the beaches where we, just shoot the breeze and get out in the open air.
What's been your trickiest parenting moment?
Trickiest parenting moment I've ever had was finding out that one of my kids was being bullied at school.
Ouch.
And then feeling helpless as a parent, because my initial response was, I'm going to find out who's bullying my child, and then I'm going to go and bloody throttle them and their parents. But obviously you can't do that. And then when my rational adult brain kicked in, I still found myself coming up short. I can't, the only pathway I've got here, as I think, is to speak with the school. And so I did make a real effort to not only speak with the school, but to make sure that I spoke with the principal, who didn't want to speak to me about it initially, until I really impressed on him that ultimately the code that they have set as a school around bullying comes under his leadership. Therefore, he's ultimately responsible. Therefore, he owes me the responsibility or the duty to talk with me about it, to find how we're going to resolve it. But even after having spoken with him, which was a good conversation, I still found myself thinking, man, I just how can this be? How can my child be experiencing this sort of challenge or discomfort or pain? And I'm helpless as a parent. I honestly felt like a period of helplessness.
Yeah, and I've found that they are the trickiest times as a parent, where you just can't really do anything because you want to fix everything and you just can't.
Yeah, it's an awful feeling. It really is. And the irony is that actually it was my child who solved it, and it was through really good open conversations with their child to let them come up with how they wanted it to be solved, and they decided to take it on themselves to resolve it through a number of strategies, which they shared with me, and we collectively agreed that would be a great approach. But boy, that was tough.
Yeah, I love the way that ended up as well. Thank you for sharing that. Now, number 3, if you could spend an hour with your children at any age at all, what age would you pick and why?
Oh, no, this is an easy one. I would pick ages 3 and 4, hands down, because they're at their most ridiculously cute stage then. And you kind of miss it when they get to like the early teenage years and you look back at the old photos and videos. Just recently I was on the couch with Chloe, my youngest, and she's showing me this video that we made of her when, she was 3 years old, walking around the house in a cardboard box with her crazy big curly hair, saying, "I am a robot," and, her brother chasing her and the dog going bananas. And those moments are just ridiculously cute, where you just want to cuddle them and give them all your love and stuff. And it seems to get harder to do that and to have those moments of pure, I don't know, just pure blisses, in that kind of, that childhood and nature that they have. And so I miss those. I miss those moments of just, wonderful, times with the kids when they were young.
Love it. Question 4, no matter how good life has been and how glad you are to be in the moment, what are you most looking forward to as a dad?
The thing I'm most looking forward to as a dad would be the day when not when the kids leave the house, but when they come back. So they come back and they've got their own families, their own partners, and they come back and we have these big meals together. And, we celebrate Christmases and birthdays together, and we have extended families all coming to the grandparents' house, our place. And we just, we just entertain with music and song and playing games together, and then getting to know their kids. I think that's going to be the most magical time of our lives.
Beautiful. And question number 5, if you could go back to Ant Williams as a young dad with no experience at raising children at all, what advice would you give yourself, and how did you actually learn why that's valuable?
There's probably a couple of bits of advice I'd give myself. They're kind of almost contradictory in a certain way. The first one I'd say is, mate, you're not going to be as good as you think you're going to be. And then I'd quickly follow it up with, but that's okay. You just got to learn how to give yourself a break when things get really tough, when you become a parent, mate, and you'll figure it out. But make sure you give yourself plenty of perspective and don't beat yourself up over it.
And how did you come across the value of that advice?
Definitely through freediving. It taught me, if you don't, you think you're going to be awesome, but you're not. And now, the more humble I get as a freediver, the more successful I've become. And it's true. I don't just say that as a throwaway line. I've been competing for 17 years, and my most successful events with my biggest performances against the strongest athletes in the world have come late in my 40s.
And Williams, it's just been a delight to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing so generously. If people did want to find out more about you, either your free diving and following you on Instagram or something like that, or even the work that you do with Modus Leadership in terms of the corporate work that you're doing, how would they find you?
Probably the easiest is either find me on LinkedIn or just through my website, which is modusleadership.com.au. And look, I do have a website that's just my freediving called antwilliams.com. I probably haven't updated it in a while, if I'm honest. So maybe best to just find me at modusleadership.com.au. Thanks, Justin.
I hope you've gotten some insight into Ant Williams as a result of this Parenting in Perspective podcast. I just love the fact that an elite ocean freediver who can dive to 100 meters on a single breath still struggles to get his kids to join him in the ocean for a surf. Join me, Dr. Justin Coulson, next time as I talk with Professor Wendy Grolnick of Clark University about seeing things from our children's perspective.
It all kind of starts with taking children's perspective, thinking about where are they coming from? How are they thinking about what they're doing? And trying to get into their heads and understand their perspective.
That's Professor Wendy Grolnick, my next guest on episode 2 of the Parenting in Perspective podcast, a Happy Families podcast. For more information on how to access more premium content, visit happyfamilies.com.au and click on memberships.